Welcome to the documentary channel. We will talk today about the rise and fall of the Irish Mafia. In the shadow of skyscrapers, in the working-class neighborhoods of Boston and New York, different organized crimes operated. They were not like the sophisticated five families of La Cosa Nostra. They were more savage, more unpredictable, and in many ways, more feared. They did not just kill their enemies, they made them disappear. This is the story of the Irish Mafia, not a single organization, but a network of ruthless gangs whose violence became their trademark and their ultimate downfall. When we think of the American Mafia, we often think of Italian crime families. But for decades, Irish gangs held immense power through sheer brutality. So today, we are exploring their rise, their reign, and their ruin. First, the roots, from street gangs to organized crime. The story begins with mass Irish immigration in the 19th century. Facing poverty and discrimination, many Irish communities formed tight-knit enclaves for protection. But some of these groups evolved into violent street gangs. Gangs like the Dead Rabbits and the Wyos controlled neighborhoods through intimidation. But the true precursor to the 20th century Irish Mafia was the White Hand Gang, which dominated the New York waterfront in the early 1900s, extorting dock workers and controlling piracy. They were eventually crushed by the Italian Mafia, but their model of controlling local industry and using extreme violence laid the groundwork for what was to come. Second, the Boston faction and the Winter Hill Gang. In Boston, the Irish mob's power was consolidated under one of the most infamous figures in American crime, James Whitey Bulger. Bulger's Winter Hill Gang did not just engage in traditional rackets like loan sharking, gambling, and drug trafficking. They perfected a brutal business model called protection. They would take over a criminal operation or business and offer protection from themselves. But their most devastating weapon was their alliance with the FBI. Bulger became a top echelon informant for the Boston FBI, feeding them information on his rivals, the New England Mafia, in exchange for protection and a free hand to operate. This unholy alliance allowed him to eliminate his competition while wearing a shield provided by the government. Next is the New York faction and the Westies. If the Winter Hill Gang was strategic, their counterparts in New York were pure, unadulterated chaos. They were known as the Westies, named for their stronghold in Hell's Kitchen. Led by Jimmy Coonan and his enforcer Mickey Featherstone, the Westies were arguably the most violent gang in American history. Their signature was making bodies disappear. They would dismember victims in the back rooms of bars like the Sunshine Cafe and dispose of the parts in the Hudson River. They became prized contractors for the Italian Mafia, particularly the Gambino family under Paul Castellano, who used them for hits too messy for his own men to handle. The Westies were a weapon of terror. Let us now talk about the downfall, rats, RICO, and betrayal. The very brutality that defined the Irish mob also led to its collapse. Unlike the omerta of the Italians, the Irish gangs were built on fragile alliances that shattered under pressure. The Westies' end. Mickey Featherstone, facing a long prison sentence, flipped and became a government witness. His testimony detailed dozens of gruesome murders and decimated the Westies. Coonan and others received life sentences. Whitey's fall. Whitey Bulger's world crumbled when his FBI handler John Connolly was exposed. The scandal rocked the FBI. Bulger went on the run for 16 years, becoming one of America's most wanted before being captured in 2011. He was convicted of 11 murders and died in prison. The 1970 RICO Act gave the feds the tools to go after entire criminal enterprises, not just individuals. The age of the neighborhood gang was over. So does the Irish Mafia still exist? The short answer is not in its classic form. The structures of Whitey Bulger and the Westies are gone. However, Irish-American organized crime has evolved. It is less about controlling neighborhoods and more about international smuggling, fuel bootlegging, and cybercrime. The romanticized, violent era of the Irish mob is a relic of the past, crushed by federal laws and the betrayals of its own members. Their legacy is a dark chapter in American crime, a story of how violence can bring power, but without the structure and codes of their Italian counterparts, it inevitably consumes itself. The Irish Mafia was a paradox. It was fiercely loyal to its own, yet its history is defined by the ultimate betrayals. They held immense power in their domains, but that power was built on a foundation of sand, pure fear, which eventually evaporated under the spotlight of justice. However, it remains a fascinating subject because it represents a raw, unfiltered form of American criminal ambition, unburdened by tradition, but doomed by its own savagery. What other criminal organizations would you like us to explore? The Russian Mafia? The Japanese Yakuza? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into a darker side of history, please give this video a like and subscribe for more content. For further reading, see Black Mass by Dick Lair and Gerard O'Neill and The Westies by TJ English. Thank you.